Something happened in 2018 that no one at the Oklahoma Capitol wants to talk about. Not because it's confusing, not because it's political drama, but because it worked. And the moment that it worked, it changed who actually runs Oklahoma. Most people think the big fight in politics is left versus right. In Oklahoma, the real fight was and still is Republican versus Republican, and only one side survived. Welcome to episode 2. Welcome back to Oklahoma Unveiled. I'm your host, Jonathan Hewitt, and last episode we laid out the groundwork. We talked about the feeling that Oklahomans have and have had for years, the sense that something else or someone else has been calling the shots from inside 23rd and Lincoln. Not the people that we send up there to represent us, not the best-hearted people that we see on the campaign trail, but something else. A feeling that the supermajority never really acted like a supermajority. Today, we start with the moment that the machine was born. A political purge in 2018 that cleared out conservative lawmakers, consolidated power, and opened the door for a consultant and political ecosystem to step into the driver's seat of Oklahoma politics. This is not a rumor. This is not theory. It's documented. And once you see and understand how the purge happened, everything that has happened since it starts to make sense. In 2018, we had just come back from a Democrat supermajority since the state's inception, right? And so when I first started working at the Capitol in 2022, I expected what I think many people expect to happen up inside the Capitol, and that's for Republican supermajority to take conservative action and conservative reform to lower taxes, like more transparency, more accountability, things like that. But I didn't see that. And what I actually saw was quite the opposite. And I then too started feeling like something was off. And so I guess my journey in all of this has started then when a member that I was working for and I started looking at like just surface level what the consultants are doing, who they work with, and kind of started the beginning of like a mapping of what happens at the state capitol. But it all leads back to 2018. So before we get to the purge itself, you have to understand the atmosphere inside the legislature at the time, right? Conservatives had numbers. And when I mean conservatives, I mean like actual conservatives. I want you to think like Tom Gann, who's in there right now, Representative Molly Jenkins, Representative Jim Shaw, Representative Jim Olson, like good conservative lawmakers. And they were starting to gain traction. And they should have been unstoppable, actually, right? The vast majority of Oklahomans want to see the same conservative reform that they've been asking for years, for decades. If you looked at Oklahoma from the outside, you would think that its conservative government was all but guaranteed, right? You're talking about 77 counties, all voting red by a large majority, right, in the presidential election, right? You have your spots here and there like Oklahoma City, Tulsa, a little bit of Broken Arrow, things like that, that just innately vote blue, right? But we're talking like 10, 11 members, right? 3 or 4 members in the Senate. So like a very, very, very large majority of Republican control. But inside the Capitol, there was this tension that was building. Quiet, subtle, but very real. So a group of conservative lawmakers had become too independent, right? They had pushed too hard, and they had asked too many questions. And I think Representative Jim Shaw said it really, really good at a rally that he spoke at yesterday when he said that the thing that they hate the most at 23rd and Lincoln is sunlight getting into the building, right? And so that's what had happened. Is sunlight was starting to get into the building, right? They disrupted the leadership's plan. They challenged the comfortable status quo. And these were members who believed in limited government, fiscal restraint, and accountability, but they were becoming too inconvenient for the powers that be. And here's the part that most Oklahomans never saw. Instead of negotiating or compromising, certain leadership aligned figures began doing something else entirely. They started recruiting primary challengers behind the scenes. They started planning how to remove the members who refused to fall in line with the leadership agendas, not with open debate, but with a calculated political operation. So you can imagine, like, put yourself in the time, like, I didn't live in Oklahoma at the time, but I came here 3 years afterwards. Like, if there was a conservative movement, you would expect that to continue and not to garner the disdain of, like, the other Republican members, right? But then it happened. In 2018, conservative lawmakers across the state were suddenly hit with surprise challengers. These challengers did not look grassroots, right? They came armed with polished ads, expensive mail campaigns, a coordinated messaging, and a strategic timing. Soon, the filings revealed the truth. A dark money group called the Conservative Alliance PAC. And I think this is a really good time to stop in case my listeners don't know what a dark money group is or what a political action committee is, right? So a political action committee is an entity that is formed with the purpose of electioneering, right? So they want to either influence elections or they want to influence legislation. Well, a dark money group has to be restrained to doing what's known as independent expenditures, which means they cannot coordinate in any way with the person that they're supporting or the person that they're opposing. And the term dark money comes from the fact that they're 501c4s, which then mean they do not legally have to disclose who their donors are. So you'll see these entities make large contributions inside states to support state questions or elections or things like that, but there's no actual money trail on who's funding it or where that money is even coming from. So the Conservative Alliance PAC in 2018 spent more than $150,000 attacking conservative Republicans. This was widely reported at the time by the Associated Press and the Journal Record on the operation. It wasn't random. It wasn't organic. It wasn't like a outgrowth of like constituents in the district that just believed in taking action. No, this was purposeful and planned. And then the Ethics Commission filings show something even more important. So of that $150,000, more than $36,000 of that PAC spending went directly to one single consultant. And that consulting group is known as Campaign Advocacy Managed Professionals, or better known inside the political rings and political circles as CAMP. And at the time, it was owned and operated by a gentleman by the name of Fount Holland. And so after the dust settled, Holland openly admitted with helping the Purge and even said he was pleased with the results. So I think we should take a moment here and pause right there and talk about what that actually means. So you're talking about a consultant who predominantly, if not 100%, supports and works with Republican candidates, Republican leadership, right? Other Republican members who claim in their mailers to be conservative, but are then purging the conservatives from the body, or at least attempting to, right? And this goes further even to like an even deeper problem. And so Representative Chris Kennedy, as reported by the Associated Press and the Journal Record, and widely known actually, participated in that purge, right? And he recruited political action committees to fund either campaigns or mailers or attack ads or whatever it may be against those conservative members. So not only do you have a consultant who praised and lauded his success in unseating them and was happy about it, but then you have a city member who now chairs prolific committees, is inside the House leadership like body that openly went after conservative lawmakers. And it was from that moment that the picture was clear. The purge was not a public revolt, and it wasn't ideologically driven. It was a consultant-driven, at least appeared to be consultant-driven, sweep designed to remove lawmakers who were too independent for the leadership that they represented. And this is the foundation of the machine. Now, you talk about like lawmakers that they went after, like Representative Tom Gann, right? And like, if you look at him inside the House now, stalwart defender of conservative principles and conservatism in the state, but he was stripped of his leadership potential, stripped of committee chairmanships, doesn't get to have bills heard in committee, all because of the consolidated power that the leadership have, right? Now, him and former Representative Sean Roberts were lucky and lived through the purge, but Representative like Tess Teague, who was targeted during it, ultimately floundered. And so that shocking revelation, you have to imagine, and how it ultimately reshaped the legislature, has critical implications on how the Oklahoma legislature is governed internally today and the outcomes that we see from it. And so normally, purges only succeed, or let me rephrase that. Purges only succeed when someone has the strategy, the infrastructure, and the money to pull it off. And in 2018, they did. That someone was a consultant network. Primary challengers had coordinated messaging, they had targeted ads, they had unified narratives, and they had political action committee support. And they had a consultant who knew exactly which conservatives to target. So the purge worked. And once the independent conservatives were removed, something predictable happened. Leadership tightened, power consolidated, committee assignments shifted, and a consultant network stepped into a place where it had never been before. And this is the moment where Oklahoma politics quietly changed directions, not with a large bang, not with any large outcry, but behind the scenes. And so when the member and I first started, we obviously located camp, and so like things like Amber Integrated PAC and other compliance firms among it. And what we found is that you'll see like almost a linear correlation with leadership and those networks. Those that didn't have those networks weren't in leadership, and then if they ascertained that network, then somehow they got into leadership. And so you can quickly see how that would have widespread ramifications. So what is the aftermath after the reshaping of the legislature? So it started to behave different. Bills that conservative Oklahomans had been demanding for years began to die without any explanation. Reforms that should have flown through a supermajority never made it out of committee. Accountability proposals evaporated before they were ever given a hearing, and over time a pattern became obvious. Lawmakers who hired consultants saw their political the lawmakers who hired certain political consultants saw their political power grow, and some moved into leadership roles, some gained influence over committee assignments, and some became gatekeepers for the policy process. And this brings us to like a really big problem that we have in both chambers, and it's the rules that govern the body, right? So a lot of people think the most important thing that their representative or senator will vote on is the bills that are placed before them. But in actuality, the very first vote that a freshman lawmaker makes is arguably the most important. And it's the adoption of the rules that will govern the body for the entire legislature, right? And in this lies the biggest problem that we have in Oklahoma. We send our members to the Capitol to represent us, but then they have to go get permission to represent us. In the House, you have to go to the majority floor leader, right? And ask permission to make a motion. Your bills unilaterally get decided what committees and who gets a hearing based on the leadership team. And so when we have good lawmakers and we wonder why they don't get anything done, it's not because they're not trying. It's because literally they voted in the laws that ultimately handcuff them behind their backs. And so if we're going to address a problem, right, we have to address the leadership problem and the stranglehold they have. But that's a different episode altogether, right? So then we saw lawmakers who did not hire certain consultants often found themselves isolated, punished, or quietly sidelined. And this is not ideology. This is not political theory. It's something very much more powerful in politics, and it's proximity. And in politics, power isn't who you see, right? Or isn't necessarily like the gavel, or isn't necessarily the who you know. It's about the proximity that you are to those that have influence and how close those are that have influence on them. And so proximity to the consultant who helped engineer the purge, and then proximity to the political action committees that quietly supported those candidates. Now you get those people benefit the most from the reshaping that happened in the legislature. And of course, proximity is not coordination, but proximity decides who survives. And so we have to ask ourselves, the next question is that if there is a coordinated effort, or maybe not even coordinated, right? We could even argue that just by proximity, there is they decide who rises and falls in the legislature. That poses severe problems for us normal, just Oklahomans. But unfortunately, the purge may have happened in 2018, but it did not end, and it was only the beginning. It created a system where lawmakers learned an unfortunate simple truth. If you want to rise, stay in office, and avoid becoming a target, you align with the consultants and the leadership who built the machine. And once that dynamic takes root, everything else becomes predictable. Who gets the committee chairmanships becomes predictable. Who gets political action committee help becomes predictable. Who gets primary, who gets defended, who gets silenced, all becomes predictable. And this is why conservative reform stalls in a conservative state. Not because there are not enough votes, but because the votes are controlled by a structure that was never elected. And therein lies our biggest problem. And every year this structure grows stronger as elections continue, right? As everyone knows that if you make leadership mad, they will recruit someone to run against you. And the probability that your challenger will be supported by the same political ecosystem they use becomes almost certain. So the purge that built the machine then built the political environment we have today. And the filings over the next few years reveal just how far that machine has spread, which will bring us to episode 3. So in episode 3, we will map the network that formed after the purge, the consultants, the political action committees, the compliance loops, the filing agents, the money trails, and the proximity structure that lets influence move quietly around official and seemingly legal laws. You will see how the machine expanded beyond campaigns and into the architecture of power itself. I will show you how the filings connect lawmakers who never seem connected, and you will see why influence in Oklahoma politics flows through the same handful of names again and again. So episode 3 is where the blueprint will become visible. I will show it to you on the screen, a map of the consultant ecosystem. So if you want real-time updates, any breaking threads that I'm following, and live investigative notes as I continue to do this, please follow me on X at Hewitt Reform, and then share this episode with someone who has wondered why conservative states never seem to get conservative outcomes. This series will answer that question. This is Oklahoma Unveiled. May God bless you, God bless America, and God bless Oklahoma.